What's up, guys? It's Arkham, and obviously you'd probably have found me through Wiz Edits, and I appreciate that, but I thought this time I was going to do a little bit of a different video just because it came to mind recently, and I thought it would just be fun to make. So in this video, today what we're going to be discussing is who exactly, or what exactly, is Nightmare from Five Nights at Freddy's. So if you don't already know, here's a couple of background information and where he came from. So Nightmare originally came from Five Nights at Freddy's 4. He's the final antagonist you go through after completing all nights 1 through 6, and you'll unlock night 7, aka Nightmare Mode, where he takes the place of Nightmare Fredbear at 4 a.m. Now, gameplay-wise, he's simply just a recolored Nightmare Fredbear who is way more aggressive and much faster, and much less forgiving during the gameplay. But I wanted today, instead of just going through how his gameplay works, I wanted to go through his lore and what exactly he represents and who exactly he is. So let's just start off with some of the obvious. Looking at his extras menu, you can see simply that he's a recolored Nightmare Fredbear with a yellow hat and bow tie. But if you look closely, instead of him just appearing to be a grayish-black recolor, you can actually see that most of his body is translucent. Now, from FNaF 4 alone, he doesn't really add much. He's more of just a mystery in that game, and you really don't know what he came from or who he even is. But if you take a look into some of the guidebooks, as well as Ultimate Custom Night, that gives us a lot more information about his whereabouts and how he came to be, or even what he is. But there's something in FNaF 4 that gives us a very good explanation to what he could be, but I'll get into that in a little bit. If you didn't know, if you actually go into the FNaF 4 files and hover over the Nightmare mode's name, Nightmare, and look at his icon, he's actually labeled as Shadow Freddy. Now, instead of just labeling that as him being a shadowed out Freddy or Fredbear, I think this truly means that he is Shadow Freddy, and here's why. Shadow Freddy, if you don't know, he's also a slightly recurring antagonist who is first seen in FNaF 2 as a purple recolored withered golden Freddy, who is just an Easter egg in that game. He doesn't do anything, he just shows up on the cameras in the Wizards parts and service room after all the Wizards have left. It's a slight chance, but you just see him peering into the camera. He kind of gives off this eerie vibe of, you don't know what this is. He's just very ghostly and doesn't really have any explanation. He also appears in FNaF 3, who we see is leading the OGs to their doom. He leads them into the back room where William is hiding, and that's when William just comes out and dismantles them. So that kind of gives off the feeling that he's possibly working with William, and we'll get more into that as well further into the video. So let's take this voice line Nightmare has in Ultimate Custom Night after killing William. Here it is. If you don't know already, Ultimate Custom Night's protagonist, or the character we play as, is William Afton, who's stuck in some mental purgatory by the Golden Freddy, which is likely Cassidy and the Crying Child. And the whole entire context of UCN is reliving Afton's past trauma. But most of the voice lines, if not all of them, are given to the characters simply to give more insight on where they came from and who they are. And when you tie this to Nightmare, think back to the Shadow Freddy file in FNaF 4. We know that Shadow Freddy is always seen with Afton. For example, we see him in FNaF 2, that is days before Afton does a second set of the murders, as well as working the day shift. FNaF 3, we see him working directly with William to lure the OGs back into the back room to get them dismantled. And as well as in FNaF 3, there's an Easter egg, a very rare chance to where in your office you can see Shadow Freddy staring at you in the corner of it. And of course Springtrap is in that game, William Afton. Now when you examine all those Shadow Freddy appearances closer, this is all, if not most of them, are all right before Afton commits another tragedy. And these tragedies he commits are evil acts. And this goes back into Nightmare's voice line of him saying that he's his wickedness made of flesh. Wickedness, obviously another term for evil. So this voice line is simply him saying, I am the embodiment of your evil. So I think that Shadow Freddy line, instead of really just showing that he's a shadowed out Fredbear who is a version of Freddy, I think this basically is them saying, or Scott Cawthon saying, hey, Nightmare, that is Shadow Freddy. Not just a nightmare version of Shadow Freddy, but Shadow Freddy himself. And here's something that can back up that point of Shadow Freddy and Nightmare being the same even further. In one of the Frights books, Hide and Seek, we see this Shadow Bonnie looking creature tormenting this kid with a lot of grief and agony to harvest it for himself. Within this same book, that Shadow Bonnie creature turns into this nightmarish entity with sharp teeth and claws. This is exactly how Nightmare is described and even looks in FNAF 4. And Shadow Bonnie is obviously related to Shadow Freddy in multiple ways. They're typically stated alongside each other in a lot of the books, and both of them are born from the same physiology, agony. And agony, that's another thing for another time. It's all in the books. It's basically just something a lot of the characters expel from themselves if they have a lot of grief, trauma, or even just anger itself. And these shadow creatures, Shadow Bonnie and Shadow Freddy, it is extremely likely that they are creatures made from this agony. Now, you're probably wondering, what purpose does Shadow Freddy have being Nightmare? Well, it's kind of simple actually. Michael Afton is a target of trauma. You know, from FNAF 4 and onward, he has gone through nothing but pain and stuff that would expel a lot of agony and give him a lot of agony traits. In FNAF 4, we see that Nightmare is recreating the FNAF 1 location for him, because if you see Bonnie and Chica, they directly mirror what they do in FNAF 1. Bonnie attacks from the left, Chica attacks from the right. As well as there's a chance in the background, you can hear a muffled, reversed version of the FNAF 1 Night 1 phone call. And some of you are probably wondering, how does Michael have anything to do with FNAF 4? Well, if you take a look into one of the log books, you can actually see Michael Afton draws a photo of what seems to be either Nightmare Fredbear or Nightmare. I believe it's Nightmare Fredbear, but I'm not entirely sure. But that would just lead to the explanation that not only is it proven through it being a mirrored FNAF 1, but him simply drawing a picture of Nightmare Fredbear should be enough proof to say Michael Afton is the one experiencing these nightmares. Now, what Nightmare does is he takes Michael's grief and agony as something he can use to further empower himself. Because the agony creatures, the more agony or remnant they get, the stronger they get. Now, Michael is one of the primary targets that can feed his agony by tenfold. He can get so much of it. And that's why he recreates a bunch of his trauma. This is a recreation of what the crying child could have went through, but this is also a recreation of one of his main traumas, which was FNAF 1, where he went through a lot in that game. Now, after a couple of the nights, this is where Nightmare, or Shadow Freddy himself, shows up. He takes the form of a shadowed Fredbear, because Fredbear is what gave him most of his trauma. That is the character who ended up getting his brother, or the crying child, killed. He shows up as a shadowed version in order to portray that he's not exactly the same Nightmare Fredbear, but rather something even darker. This also links back to Nightmare stating in Ultimate Custom Night that he's the embodiment of Afton's evil. He's not a creature that just lays around and does nothing. What he does is always something evil, and so everything he has done, even you can look back to FNAF 3 when he lured the OGs. When they got dismantled, they would have left a lot of remnant behind. And Shadow Freddy likely consumed a lot of this remnant for himself. That's probably the only reason he helped William. But everything Nightmare does in this game is rather not necessarily to kill Michael. If he ends up doing that, that happens, but he's really just trying to expel all of his fear in order to gain all the agony he can for himself. Now, here's another character that Nightmare and Shadow Freddy are extremely similar to, and that is Eleanor. Eleanor is honestly the main villain of the Fazbear Fright stories. She is described kind of like how the shadows are, shadowy masses that just feed on everyone's fear and agony. Now, Nightmare states, as stated before, that he's William's evil embodied. Eleanor also states this in one of the books. I think it's one of the Stitch Wraith Stingers, that she is born from William's evil. Now, do I think that this makes them the same character? No, you can easily argue it, and a lot of people theorize this, but I don't think that. I think rather they are identical beings from identical origin while not being the same character, they seem to have the same power and goals. So where does this all lead? While it does lead to giving us the origins and power of what Shadow Freddy and Nightmare has and what they do, there is also a statement in the official character encyclopedia. While it does have its errors, it states here, will Shadow Freddy turn out to be a crucial character in the ongoing mythology of Five Nights at Freddy's? Maybe or maybe not. Time will tell. While this doesn't officially say that he is coming, this is a statement that none of the other characters in this book have. So I think this is a hint that Shadow Freddy, his story isn't over, and that he will be coming, probably the next antagonist of the franchise. But overall, I just wanted to make a character to shine light on both Nightmare and Shadow Freddy. These are both my favorite characters within the franchise, and both are one of my favorite characters of all time, matter of fact. I always thought that it was a shame that characters like Golden Freddy and Lefty, while they are cool, at least Golden Freddy is, that they get praised despite being recolors, but Shadow Freddy and Nightmare always seem to be left out and hated on for being recolors, which doesn't really make any sense to me, seeing that Nightmare has one of the coolest designs in the franchise, if not the coolest. But anyway, guys, I appreciate it for watching. Let me know if you want me to do any of this. I thought this was really fun, and I just wanted to get Nightmare some more popularity if I could. It would mean a lot to me if you could like and subscribe. I also have a TikTok, which is where I post most of my edits on. I'm kind of taking a break from them right now, but I'll hope to get you guys some videos out soon. But anyway, take care and much love. I hope to see you guys again. See you guys.